of my dialogues tutorial. This is going to be focused on the triggering behind it, what makes it work, what makes it animate, all that. I'm going to start with some of the minor changes that I made. One of the things I discussed in the long version of the first video was creating a template to handle a lot of this, and I expressed that I do not want a template. I could not get a template to work because oftentimes you'll end up having to move stuff around, and after my first iteration of this, that's exactly what happened. You'll see from my last videos I've updated this a little bit. I put my other two buttons up here so it's not just 5 and 5. Changed my border around, altered the layout a little bit, and added these new buttons. How this works is you click a monster that you would like to fight. It shows you the animated monster over here. Name, level, description. You could train him, which increases his level, which also increases the cost. You get 3 attempts to fight. Setting variables is very important though. And this is my short section. Very, very simple in this case. If you're also using a portrait type dialogue item, it shouldn't be too hard for you to set up something similar to this. When you're creating a list of anything to loop through, if it's any list type dialogue items, not list type, but a list of dialogue buttons like I have here, this modify index +1 is going to save you so much time. Instead of doing it the old-fashioned way, you can see down here I have it done the old-fashioned way because of how simple it is. Boss stun reduction 1, boss stun reduction 2, boss stun reduction 3, etc. But this system can hold, 100 heroes and or 100 bosses, and every boss has a list of things set. So rather than putting 1 here, and 2 in here, and 3 and all here, and 4 and all here, you just do modify index +1 and reference the index. My variables in this case are my creep type, which is GameLink unit, the icon, the costs I set, the description. These are all preset at the beginning. Alright, so pretty simple. Whenever you want to add something new to this system, you'll copy a chunk, Control-C, Control-V, and pick your creep. Set creep type equal to, and I could pick any monster. We'll go with Title Revenant. And this automatically fetches the icon. So these are the icons I have that represent what unit you're going to select. It's an image type variable. I have to convert a string to image file. And similarly to the portraits, you need to make sure that your actor and your unit type have the same ID. And I just use a catalog field value to get the unit icon of this unit, well, of the actor that has the same ID as this unit that I set. Like 99% of units will have the same ID already. This guy didn't, because he's an uprooted Tree of Wonders, and his model just says, or not Tree, Ancient of Wonders. His model is just Ancient of Wonders, but his actor and his unit name are uprooted Ancient of Wonders. So I had to copy and paste the model and change the ID of it, which wasn't very difficult. And it worked for me. This should work automatically, assuming the Title Revenant is named properly. I'm not even going to check. Then I could set my description. This dude kills you. That's it. Every time I add a new dude here, I'll be able to click it, he's going to pop up, and I can fight him, and when I fight him, it's already telling me what unit to spawn. It's going to spawn this unit. I don't want to get too far into this. I have all my costs preset though, and I just use an exponentially increasing formula that has a base value, a static increase, a percent increase, and an exponential increase, and that is how the cost is associated with the levels. So the very start of my triggering for dialogues is that I use a general trigger to separate all of them. I use any dialogue is used by any player. I have my local variables set because local variables are a lot faster than function calls, like 5 to 6 times faster. So this is just making sure that it's a player using it. And it's setting the triggering player to a variable. It's telling me what dialogue is being selected, dialogue containing used dialogue, and it's telling me what dialogue item is being used. And then I use a switch, and each switch has a different case. It's kind of like stacking if-then-else statements, except more organized. So if hero selection dialog box, when you set your if, here it is, depending on dialogue used. So it's switching if then else, if dialogue used, this value, is equal to hero selection dialog box, if dialogue used is equal to hero loading dialog box, then continue to do actions. So each of my dialogues, I have like 40 of them in my game, each of them has its own action definition which handles the running of it. Helps a lot with organization, otherwise I would have literally 14,000 lines of code all packed into this trigger. And I'm not even sure a trigger could handle that. I left this read out just so we could see it better for this tutorial. If Beastmaster dialog box, that is the dialog box that we just made. If that is the dialog box containing the item being clicked, then run these actions. You'll see I have disable dialog item, run my actions, wait 0, and enable dialog item. That along with a general, it's a way of overcoming click cheat. Because auto-clicker, there you go. There's a program called auto-clicker that will make your mouse click like 60,000 times in a second, and it clicks so fast that it can overwhelm dialogue buttons. So, like with spawning one of these dudes, if I used an auto-clicker to click spawn, it would click so fast that it wouldn't register that it was clicked yet and tell you to stop clicking or stop actions, and it would spawn 15 of these dudes for free. And it can become really hectic in games where you're using dialogues to apply stat points or really to do anything important. So using this wait, disabling is the first action before running anything, and then using a wait 0 before enabling it, it adds a second of click lag. Like you can't make a high-speed dialogue clicking based game. I don't know who would or why you would, but that wait adds like it's a noticeable delay after your click. It's maybe 1/10 of a second, but it also prevents it from being abused. So I just have my action definition that forwards the triggering player and the dialogue item used. Alright, getting to the meat and taters. Dialogue used Beastmaster. It's an action definition. If you don't know how to create action definitions, you right click over yonder, you go to new, you go to new action definition. And an action definition is literally a set of actions, and you can forward data from, you can set parameters to forward data from the event fired trigger to this action. Up here in parameters, this is what gets forwarded. I want triggering player and dialog item used forwarded. In your grammar text, you could set that. Usually it'll be your trigger name and then your two parameters without this text here. I just always add the text because it makes it easy for me. So then when you have your action, dialog used, Beastmaster, just an action, but you made it. Then you just have to fill in your triggering player. I want my triggering player to be 1, me. Dialog item used is the dialog that was clicked. So when you run your action, all of this stuff is going to happen. And these are parameters. I always set my parameters to variables because I'm used to working with variables and not parameters. So my very first variables are dialog item used and triggering player, and I just forward the parameters into local variables. Set local variable equal to parameter triggering player. So it forwards all the information from the trigger to this action definition. I always have an index in there for my loops, and temp monster, I'll show you what this is down at the bottom. The very first button's pretty basic. I use another switch depending on each button. The more info button, it's the white button, the fight button, the close button, and the train button. And then I use a loop for all of the side buttons. So more info is my button 1. It simply brings up the help menu open to the page associated with the Beastmaster, which is 21. Close, above all else, it hides the dialog box and it resets all of my values. It unselects all the monsters, it gets rid of the portrait, it sets all the text to 0. Pretty simple. And it removes buffs in my game. When heroes are talking, it disables them. But it's important when you close a dialogue, either when you close it or when you open it, you want to reset it. It's just a really good habit of getting into. I prefer to do it on close. Fight monster is my second button. I'm going to come back to that in a second because the fourth part's more important. So training a monster, assuming you have a monster selected like I do, it just makes sure that you have the currency to do so, it makes sure that they're below a specific level, it plays noise, it alters my currency, it increases the level of the monster, and then it updates the dialogue, which I'm going to take a second and show. Creep level. Beastmaster dialogue stats 2. So stats 1 is his name, stats 2 is his level, stats 3 is his description, stats 4 is the cost here, stats 5 is the gold cost, and stat 6 is the attempts? No, I don't think I have a stat 6. Maybe I do. Enough currency. All really simple. If you've created the dialogue, you're going to use the same thing, same concept, I guess, the same dialogue items that you saved to variables. You are now going to modify. These are all dialogue items that we saved to variables when we created it. Pretty easy. You do not ever need, I don't want to say ever, 99% of the time you're not going to need to create dialogue items during the game. You can create your dialogue at the beginning and then update them. I don't need to create 1,000 names and then hide all the names and show the name I want. I don't need to set all of these icons when I first make it. When the dialogue is made, all of the icons are this question mark. And then I set the question mark to the icon when it goes through the generation. I use a loop as my default, so if I didn't click button 1, 2, 3, or 4, it means that I clicked one of these side buttons, of which there are 12. Then I check if the dialog item being used is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And the creep is there, so if I'm clicking a question mark, it shouldn't be doing anything. So it's just making sure there's actual values there, which for your situations may also be very important. You don't want to overlook small things like that. And this is where I have to save in a global variable the index. Each player has their own variation of this screen. And I don't want what I'm doing to affect what someone else is doing on this screen. So I need to save what I am doing, what boss I have up needs to be saved into a variable so that through different instances of button clicking, I know what button is clicked. So I click one of these heroes and it sets a variable equal to the index, so I know when I click hero 3, boss 3, I'm sorry, I keep calling them heroes. When I click boss 3, there's a global variable that knows I have boss 3 selected. When I close it, it's cleared, I have boss 0 selected, and we start over until I select a new boss. When I fight him, it clears also. And I also have the local variable temp monster just for consistency. I also set that to index. And going back to the top, I skipped this earlier and said I'd come back to it. I have temp monster, and it is set to that global variable, the Beastmaster player creep selected index trig player. And that is, again, just the index that I've selected, the creep index. It's a way of forwarding that information through different iterations of use of this dialog while it's open. And just like above with the train monster and the fight monster, I'm just updating the dialogue. I have to fetch the costs from that variables that I set, the represent costs. I first fetch the cost, and then I set the dialogue items to show the costs, to show the name. And that's all based on this index, the whole temp monster. That way I know which monster I'm pulling. Pretty simple, you already know how to do this stuff, the updating of the dialogue. Remember that when you update it, when you set the model to another model, you need to have wait. You need to wait for it to finish loading before you can send an actor message to change its scale. And your scale needs to have a duration to it. You need a blend-in duration. I usually just use 0.1. And your scale is probably going to be small. Mine's 0.25 in this case. The scale of 1 looks kind of like this. Isn't that creepy? You don't want that. The rest of this is self-explanatory. It's literally setting dialogue item text equal to other variable. So we're going to train him, make him big and strong, and we're going to fight him. And he's going to kick my ass. He's gonna spawn with a wave of baddies. There he is. Come and get me, bro. Spawned at 63. Everything is set in triggers to affect his damage and stats, and he killed me already. Alright, that's it. Good luck. God bless.